strong voter education, and transparent oversight are essential to ensuring that every voter can cast a ballot with confidence that it will be recorded and counted correctly. Now let me introduce you to our panelists, Honorable Mr. A. Srinivas Sir, Chief Electoral Officer of Haryana. He is an officer of Indian Administrative Service 2004 batch of the Haryana cadre with over 2 decades of experience in public administration across diverse governance domains. He has served as Deputy Commissioner of Mahendragarh and Rewari, overseen district administration and development planning, and has headed several key departments of the government of Haryana. His experience spans leadership roles in information technology, higher and technical education, agriculture, marketing, power distribution, and metropolitan development authorities in Gurgaon and Faridabad. He holds a master's degree in public administration from Osmania University and a master's degree in public policy from King's College London, and currently serves as Chief Electoral Officer of Haryana. We also have Mr. Yogi Kalandarishvili. I think he is busy with the bilateral meetings, so I would rather skip this portion. We have Justice Uzaya Ratowali, Chairperson Electoral Commission Fiji. Sir was appointed Chairperson of the Electoral Commission of Fiji on 30th January 2025 by the President of the Republic of Fiji, while concurrently serving as a Pluton Judge of the High Court of Fiji. He has over 2 decades of experience in legal practice and judicial service. He holds a Bachelor of Laws and a professional diploma in legal practice from the University of the South Pacific and a Master of Laws in International Human Rights from the University of Hong Kong. His judicial career began in 2009 and has included senior leadership roles. We have with us Dr. Nidhi, Associate Professor, MDU Rohtak. Dr. Nidhi is Deputy Director of the Center for Life Skills and Soft Skills at Maharshi Dayanand University, Rohtak, and an Assistant Professor at the Center of Professional and Allied Studies. An alumna of FNS, University of Delhi, she holds an MBA, PhD in Human Resource Management and B.Ed. She has over 14 years of experience in teaching, research, and academic administration with international corporate HR experience at Lufthansa AG. Her work spans business, communication, entrepreneurship, research methodology, life skills training, and multiple national and international research projects and publications. We also have with us Dr. Subodh Sharma, Associate Professor, IIT Delhi. He is an Associate Professor of Computer Science and Engineering at the Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi, and holds the P.K. Gupta Chair Professorship in Privacy and Decentralization. Prior to joining IIT Delhi, he was a research scientist at the University of Oxford. His research focuses on principled software design and validation for large-scale public digital systems, including digital identity, payment platforms, e-governance, and electronic voting. He has contributed to public discourse on Aadhaar and UPI through print media and is currently advancing automated reasoning for smart contracts, enabling formal and provable contract audits and strengthening automated security analysis. Thank you so much, everyone. Now I would request Honorable CEO Sir to please join and share his inputs. Thank you.
Distinguished delegates, colleagues from election management bodies, representatives of International IDEA, media and friends. It is a privilege to moderate this session on balloting, including electronic voting machines and postal ballots. This topic lies at the heart of democratic legitimacy because balloting is the moment when citizens translate political rights into political authority. Across the world, democracies have adopted different balloting systems: paper ballots, electronic voting machines, postal ballots, or a combination of these. These choices are shaped not by technology but by history, constitutional values, scale, and public trust. Our discussion today is therefore not about declaring one system superior. It is about understanding why different systems exist, what they have achieved, and what lessons they offer. This conversation is especially relevant as we move towards deeper international collaboration with distinct electoral traditions, administrative capacities, and societal contexts. Guided by international ideas, principle-based approach, this session aims to identify shared democratic values in balloting while representing national diversity. Why balloting systems matter today? Balloting is the most direct and visible interface between the citizen and the democratic state. Regardless of political systems or cultures, the act of voting is which legitimacy is created. In contemporary democracies, this act is under unprecedented scrutiny. Elections are no longer questioned only on outcomes but on processes, transparency, and credibility. At the same time, technological change, whether through electronic voting, audit mechanisms, or postal voting, has altered both expectations and anxieties around elections. What makes this theme especially relevant today is that democracies are operating in a very different context. Some are large and diverse, others small and stable. Some prioritize speed and scale, and others visibility and simplicity. Understanding balloting systems is therefore essential to understanding how democracies sustain legitimacy in the modern world. The key challenges in the balloting system that we face, this theme addresses several structural challenges being faced by the election management globally. There is often a gap between technological robustness and public perception. A system may be legally sound, yet misunderstood by citizens, leading to mistrust. Democracies face trade offs: transparency versus efficiency, speed versus verifiability, inclusion versus administrative control. Political ballots, for example, postal ballots, for example, enhance inclusion but raise concerns about chain of custody and verification. Electronic system improves efficiency and scale but raise questions about observability. Misinformation has emerged as a major challenge. Voting technologies and procedures are increasingly politicized, sometimes without evidence. Addressing these gaps requires not just better systems but better communication, legal clarity, and international learning. The importance of this theme lies in its impact on democratic legitimacy itself. When citizens trust the voting process, election outcomes are accepted, even by those who lose. When trust weakens, democratic stability is at risk. Multiple stakeholders are affected. Voters need systems that are understandable and accessible. Political parties require confidence that the process is fair and neutral. Election management bodies carry the institutional responsibility of balancing law, logistics, and trust. Courts increasingly act as arbiters of electoral disputes, while media and civil society, shape public perception and credibility. This is why international idea emphasizes principle-based frameworks, that is legality, transparency, inclusiveness, and accountability, rather than uniform models. Balloting systems do not merely administer elections, they shape how democracy is experienced by citizens. Let me take a brief about how the Election Commission of India has taken this theme forward through an historical perspective in a brief. The Election Commission of India is a constitutionally established independent election management body entrusted with the conduct of elections at an unparalleled scale. India's electoral context is defined by size, diversity, geographical spread, and logistical complexity, with hundreds of millions of voters participating in a single electoral cycle. Historically, India relied on paper ballots. However, during earlier decades, elections faced challenges such as booth capturing, high evidence of invalid votes, and delayed counting. These were not theoretical risks, but operational realities that affected voter confidence and electoral integrity. In response, the Election Commission of India adopted a gradual, legally authorized approach to reform, introducing electronic voting machines through pilots, legislative backing, and judicial scrutiny. Importantly, these changes was not technologically driven alone. They were context driven, aimed at strengthening the principles of free and fair elections. This evolution reflects a key international idea principle that balloting systems must respond to democratic context while remaining anchored in law and constitutional values. From the Election Commission of India's perspective, electronic voting machines are not a standalone solution, but one component of a comprehensive electoral process. Their use is supported by detailed procedures, including multi-stage testing, sealing, candidate participation, and transparent counting protocols. To understand strengthening public confidence, the Election Commission of India introduced voter verifiable audit mechanisms, reinforcing the principle that technology must be accompanied by verification and transparency. At the same time, the Election Commission of India has steadily expanded postal ballot voting to enhance inclusion, covering service voters, voters on election duty, senior citizens, persons with disabilities, and others, while maintaining strict eligibility, verification, and timelines. Throughout this journey, the Election Commission of India's work has remained subject to judicial scrutiny, political scrutiny, and public debate, which are essential features of democratic accountability. The Indian experience illustrates that scale, integrity, and inclusion can coexist provided reforms are legally grounded, procedurally robust, and transparently communicated. One of the central learnings from the ECI's experience is the importance of minimum institutional guarantees that allow an election management body to function effectively. These include a constitutional mandate that ensures independence, statutory authority over all stages of the electoral process, and continuous judicial oversight that reinforces legality and accountability. Equally important are benchmarks derived from field practices. The ECI's experience demonstrates that consistency across a vast and diverse territory is achieved through standardized operational procedures applied uniformly from polling stations to counting stations. Multi-layered security, clear chain of custody arrangements, and mandatory participation of candidates or their agents at critical stages such as polling, sealing, storage, and counting serve as practical benchmarks that strengthen credibility. Timely, transparent, and rule-bound counting processes further reinforce public confidence. Together, these guarantees and benchmarks translate constitutional authority into day-to-day electoral integrity. Finally, the central recommendation emerging from this global experience is that electoral integrity must lead and technology must follow. No voting method, electronic or paper, can substitute for clear law, transparent procedures, and accountable institutions. Second, every form of balloting must be verifiable in a way that it is understandable to ordinary voters, whether through physical audit trials or observable processes. Third, expanding access to postal or absentee voting should be gradual, targeted, and accompanied by visible safeguards to maintain public trust. Fourth, election management bodies must move beyond one-time communication and institutionalize transparency and dialogue with political parties, civil society, and voters. Finally, voter confidence itself should be treated as a democratic asset, requiring sustained education, openness, and proactive engagement. These recommendations closely reflect international ideas' emphasis on trust, inclusion, and legitimacy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for your valuable insights. especially on why balloting systems matter today, and also the democracy trade-offs. May I now request Honorable Justice Uzaya Ratawili sir to please share your inputs. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Namaste, namaskaram, bulubinaka to you all. I bring you greetings from the Electoral Commission of Fiji. Just with a show of hands, you know where Fiji is? Have you ever been to Fiji? Okay. Um, just by way of general introduction, the estimated population of Fiji as of January is 940,000, so less than 1 million, and the number of registered voters 701,140. So in terms of scale, you see the vast difference between the experience of Fiji and of India, as was shared by the chair of the Indian Election Commission and as well as by Mr. Srinivas today. That's my presentation. I'll introduce you to Fiji's election management body, the type of elections that we are mandated to conduct, our electoral background, and trade union elections. Now, Fiji's election management body is a bit different in its model. There are two constitutionally mandated bodies. The first, or the primary one, with the primary responsibility is the Electoral Commission, of which I am the head. It comprises of a chair, who is it's either a sitting judge or someone who is qualified to be a judge. In Fiji's context, it's a legal practitioner or a lawyer with a minimum of 15 years experience. So the chair is accompanied by 6 sitting commissioners. They are all part-time posts. We have an appointment of 3 years. The other constitutionally mandated body is the position of the supervisor of elections. So very simply speaking, the commission is the policy-making body. It has general oversight of the conduct of elections and all associated duties, whilst the supervisor is actually the CEO, if you like. They run the daily operations of the management body. Sorry. The type of elections that we conduct, main one is the general election. We also tasked with running trade union elections, local government elections, and recently, as of the last year, we have been given the responsibility of conducting a national referendum for the first time in Fiji's history. So as we speak this year, the Elections Commission of Fiji is expected to run 3 election events: local government elections, a possible referendum, and the general elections. That's in a snapshot. That is Fiji's electoral background, the type of electoral system we have. We have an open list proportional representation system. Uh, it's each political party has a list of candidates. Each voter in Fiji has a choice. They choose what candidate they prefer, but each party has a threshold to meet before they can have members in parliament. So the threshold in Fiji, each party or independent candidate should achieve at least 5% of the votes cast to enable them to qualify to have members in parliament. The constituency, there's one national constituency. There are no MPs, if you like. Members of parliament, as of the last general elections, 55. Period of voting is 1 day, that's the voting day. but you also have pre-poll and also have postal voting. Method of voting on election day, pre-poll and postal voting, it's manual. You have a ballot paper. I'll show you the ballot paper. That's causing a lot of grief for us. You'll see why when I show it to you. Voters either circle or tick the candidate of their choice. Registration and voting is voluntary. There's no compulsory voting in Fiji. Single ballot paper has no distinguishing marks for each candidate. Each candidate is assigned a number. So to choose the candidate of your choice, you have to tick their number. This, as you can imagine, causes a lot of problems for the elderly and people who are nervous when they have to poll because they forget the numbers of their preferred candidate. Manual counting, I'm sure you have it in India as well. So the in-person voting is counted at the ballot location, the polling station, whilst the postal voting and the early polls are counted all together at the National Count Center. Threshold, as I said, each party or each independent has to have 5% of the total votes cast. And we have the Constitution plus 3 distinctive electoral laws, which are currently under amendment at the moment. That's the infamous ballot paper. So it causes a lot of issues. It's highly likely that it's going to change for the next general election. It's come for much scrutiny and much well-deserved criticism. Trade union elections, these are conducted for office holders of trade unions. We are also mandated to carry this out. These are only for registered unions, and the system is different from the national general election because there is a block vote method. Results are first past the post, there's no threshold required. Interestingly, for trade union elections, they use touchscreen machines to vote. You may ask why this has not been adopted for the general election. People in Fiji are generally very conservative. They need a lot of convincing. So at the moment we are persisting with manual voting and manual counting. It's a sample of the trade union ballot paper. These are touchscreen voting machines. They were donated to the commission. They were donated and they're still running at the moment. And there are no complaints to the trade unions, but we try to convince people to adopt them for the national general elections. It's very difficult to do so. There are differences in the ballot papers. Voting via touch screen. Ballot paper is custom sized in designed thermal paper. The touch screen is used to vote. Machine puts the vote onto the ballot paper. Ballots instantly printed, imported, higher cost. The ballot paper, pre-printed A5 colored pointer paper. Pens are used to mark the paper. Ballots are pre-printed prior to deployment. They're locally available. They're low cost. Results for using the touchscreen machines automatically tabulated. Significantly less time than manual counting. One person can carry the votes from all machines. Reduces human error significantly. Paper ballot papers, manual counting takes time depending on the number of voters and candidates. It requires participation in counting, verifying, and tabulating results. Now, that's a snapshot of Fiji's ballot system or election system. It's a combination using ballot papers and electronic voting, which is only available for trade union elections. I put it this way. People are generally more accepting of technology when the stakes are not as high. general elections, they prefer the manual. So we are currently reviewing our electoral laws to ensure that voters get a ballot paper format that is simple and easy to use. And I'd add this additional conclusion that my time here has been very useful and eye-opening in terms of what's available out there and what is possible, especially for small jurisdictions like Fiji. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, sir, for your inputs. And really, the ballot paper looks very, very complex, and such challenges you are facing there, and how you are overcoming them also. And also, yes, indeed, it's very difficult to convince people. This is the biggest challenge whenever we talk about any electoral process. And very grateful to you, sir, that you are feeling that yes, it was a helpful session. This conference is actually bringing out what it is supposed to. Thank you so much, sir. May I now request Dr. Nidhi to share your insights? Thank you.
Um, a very warm welcome to one and all present here. My name is Dr. Nidhi, and I'm from IIIDEM University, which is the State University of Haryana. My topic of presentation is postal ballots in India, legal framework and voting procedure. So before I begin the presentation, I would like to share that postal balloting in India, especially for the foreign delegates, it could be important, that postal balloting in India is a legally sanctioned exception. That is, to live up to the promise of Article 326, where we promise universal adult suffrage. Here, what the postal balloting is doing is to include people who otherwise would have been disenfranchised from the right of voting. So, as I just mentioned, it is a legally sanctioned exception. So, why do we actually have postal ballots in India? We have postal ballots in India to enable voting without physical presence, to ensure inclusiveness, and to address service and mobility constraints, which I'll explain in the presentation. So it has a legal basis. Section 60 of the Representation of People Act 1951 specifies the special procedure for voting by postal ballot by certain defined classes. The Conduct of Election Rules 1961, Rule 17 to 27M, lays a complete legal framework on how to conduct these elections. Election Commission of India gives instructions and guidelines timely to the electoral body, to the election officers, to operationalize these provisions uniformly across all constituencies. The core principles are secrecy of vote. Secrecy of vote is maintained through multi-envelope system, separating voters' identity from the vote choice. The second principle, which is equality of vote, postal ballot carries the same legal weight as the vote casted through EVM at the polling station. There is no distinction made at the stage of counting, reinforcing electoral equality. Integrity of the process. Uh, Integrity of the process is ensured through layered safeguards such as declaration, verification, sealed custody, rule based rejection, and observer oversight, prioritizing credibility over administrative speed. Traceability and with confidentiality. Administrative traceability allows verification of authenticity without linking voters' identity to the casted vote. So the categories that are eligible for postal ballots in India are service voters, special voters, absentee voters, voters on election duty, and voters in preventive detention. Service voters. Service voters are voters. The definition is defined. There's a clear definition given in the RP Act 1950 of the service voters, and the procedures are given in RP Act 1951. So the service voters are people from the armed forces, people serving the Central Armed Police Forces, government employees posted abroad. Now, in 2016, a recent amendment was made where the service voters were, the ballot was the postal ballot was sent through one way electronic transmission. So it was only one way that the postal ballot is sent to there are two, is sent electronically transmitted to two people where the person is service personnel is posted to ensure security. So the e-pin was given is given to the record officer, and the postal ballot is given to the unit officer. The service officer on the service voter collects both the things, opens using the one-time password, marks the choice of vote, and then sends it back through speed post. Here, it is important to note that there is a declaration made in Form 13A, which is done in the presence of a designated officer who checks the identity first, that the person who is voting is the actual person. So the identity is verified, and only then, after the declaration, the person puts the vote in a different envelope, and thus the vote is separated from the declaration. Special voters. Special voters are high constitutional functionaries. Postal voting avoids security complications and prevents symbolic or undue influence at local polling stations. This preserves both personal franchise and institutional neutrality, a concern that is also recognized in comparative electoral practice. Now, this is just a small list. The list is, of course, closed and defined, but I've just written 4 5 constitutional functionaries for just an understanding. Absentee voters. Absentee voters is a category where senior citizens who are over 80 years of age, persons with disabilities, COVID affected voters, and notified essential services voters can vote through filling up a form, which is Form 12B in this case. So, in the first three categories, which is senior citizens, persons with disabilities, and COVID affected voters, in these three categories, um, the team the polling officer team goes to their residence or the place like in case of COVID affected voters that were hospitals, goes to the voter and gets the vote cast in. Here, the secrecy is maintained. The representatives of the political parties are also made available. It is made sure that there is an officer who would attest the Form 13A, and the vote is casted in secrecy. They carry a mobile structure with them to hide the voter while exercising the choice of vote. Whereas in notified essential services, uh, uh, people who are in the notified essential services, they have to vote going to postal voting stations or centers. So this is quite identical to the actual polling stations where EVM people vote through EVM. It is almost similar. There are compartments. The infrastructure is almost similar. It's just that they cast their vote using postal ballots. Voters on election duty are polling personnel, police and security forces, drivers and support staff. Voters on election duty. They also vote in a facilitation center, which is again similar to the actual polling station which is there in the assembly constituency. So here they cast their vote exactly in the same way which they would have done using EVM, but here they use a postal ballot. So the journey of postal ballot starts with the application of postal ballot, as I just mentioned earlier. Prescribed form is given by the voter to the returning officer, and it is a time-bound submission. Usually, the submission is done within 7 days, and the verification is done by the returning officer. On the verification, the ballot paper is issued and with a unique identification number. or a QR code and dispatched by the returning officer. The contents of postal ballot are: there's a postal ballot, there's a declaration form which is Form 13A, a cover A in which the voter inserts the casted vote, the cover B, which is the bigger envelope in which the voter puts the declaration and the ballot. Casting the postal ballot, the preference is marked, of course, in secrecy. The ballot is placed in cover A. Declaration is signed separately. Return of postal ballot is done through post by service voters, but whereas, as I just mentioned, in service voter, in the other categories, they can cast their vote at voting stations. In case of absentee voters, the in the top three categories, of course, the team visits the home. Receipt and storage, the date and the vote that the returning officer receives is always given a date and time stamp. It is put in a secure custody. Strong rooms are assigned for it. There is no opening before the counting day. Here, while the box is opened in the evening, that is the votes that are being collected are opened and put in the strong room in the presence of all the party representatives as well, authorized party representatives. Counting of postal ballots starts before EVM. That is, in the recent notification of September 2025 of ECI, it was mentioned that if the EVM counting starts at 8:30, the counting of the postal ballots starts at 8 a.m. It was done because the number has increased drastically due to the availability of home voting. The declaration is always verified first. Invalid ballots are rejected as per rules. The grounds of rejection of invalid ballots are that the declaration is not signed, or the declaration and ballot are in the same cover, the vote is not marked properly, or is received late. Safeguards against misuse: voter specified identification is done in the form, which is the declaration form. Declaration is done under oath, always done in the presence of an officer, a designated officer. Then there are penal provisions for false declaration, and there is always observer oversight. Comparisons with EVM. Um, EVM and postal are not substitute to each other. They Postal voting just complements EVM and tries to fill the gap which the EVM has left, like reaching the places where EVM does not reach due to logistic issues. So higher inclusion, it has of course a higher inclusion. It is a slower process. It requires higher security and is of course a great administrative burden because a lot of people and manpower is required. In terms of international context, it is widely used in developed democracies. Giving a specific example from Europe, 13 countries in Europe have in country voting, whereas if I bifurcate the two, seven countries allow for all users, whereas six have restricted voting for, I mean, for a said class. So, and I think in Georgia there is no. In Fiji also there is in postal voting available for some class of or some categories of people. So there's higher trust requirement, and it is vulnerable to politicization, for which India has a lot of safeguards to keep the vote safe and integrity is in place. Our postal voting is aligned with the international idea. We have the principles of inclusiveness, equality, legal certainty, and transparency well in place. And to conclude, postal ballots ensure that democracy reaches voters who cannot reach the polling station. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your detailed insights on postal ballot and how it pertains to the inclusivity, and we don't leave any voter behind. Thank you so much, ma'am. May I now call on stage Dr. Subodh Sharma, sir, with his insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shimon. And thank you, IICDEM, for giving me an opportunity to present my views on this very, very important topic. So the focus of my submissions would be on electronic voting machines. And at the heart of any election technology, there is a very simple and objective demand, which is to capture the voting intention in a verifiable and way with high integrity, transport that intention, count, and then finally have it audited. Now, all of these processes need to be made in a certain way that can survive the scrutiny, recounts, court challenges, time, and politicization around it, while always maintaining some key properties. And this is already been laid out in great detail by Srinivasji in his opening remarks, that there has to be secrecy. There has to be a vote secrecy in the sense that once the vote enters into the system in a digital format, the secrecy of the vote remains intact all the way up to the counting process and beyond, which means that voter to vote mapping should never be released at any point in time. The second is integrity. Vote integrity is again an extremely important property, which essentially boils down to the fact that the system should be able to provide a reasonable evidence or proof that the vote was cast as recorded, counted as cast, and while these two properties hold true, no vote addition, deletion, or vote manipulation took place. So that essentially makes sure that the voting system is full of integrity. Finally, availability, right? So the voting technology should be made available to regions where it would otherwise be inaccessible, right? So making it, and when it comes to technology, making sure that the devices themselves are available during the voting process, which means that they don't break down or get offline if they are connected to power sources or whatnot. Right? Accessibility is mostly the user interface in the context of electronic voting machines. Transparency runs through horizontally through every process of this voting machine, where you essentially provide a proof that every component of this election technology is being made transparent to the voter in a way that doesn't take the voter agency away. Um, and finally, a very robust dispute resolution. Right, so this theme matters because of all the properties that I just laid out. However, this in the context of election technology, when it goes digital, these properties become extremely difficult to manage. And India has done a fantastic job. The Indian EVMs, through its technology, the EVM technology, with very strong and well thought out processes around it, has made sure that the elections maintain their integrity, their transparency, accessibility, and vote secrecy. And the context of my talk would be to put out my submissions on how do we to lay out certain questions in the sense that going 20 years from now, when the technology is so rapidly evolving, and the society is coming up with newer demands with each passing day, what else could be done vis-a-vis electronic voting machines? So where are the gaps? And those gaps necessarily do not mean that the current electronic voting machine technology is not safe to use. It's very robust, very resilient. It's in many ways like Indian railways, right? Extremely robust and resilient, which could weather all patterns, which could weather all sorts of situations and has come out very, very strongly. But how do we move forward? So much of my thesis in this talk would be around that. Right? So as the election technology advances, so does the security surface area of it, and therefore attack possibility increases. So the purpose of it would become clear in the forthcoming slides. But before I get into the nitty-gritties of election voting technology advances in the academic research landscape, let me tell you what are the global trends and what are the emerging patterns. So paper as an evidence is coming back, of course, not as paper ballots, certainly not for a country as large and as diverse and complex as ours. But voter verified paper audit trails have certainly made a mark. Examples include certainly India, USA, Philippines, Bulgaria, Venezuela, and so on and so forth. So VVPAT essentially gives the power of evidence to the voter to convince the voter that the vote that she has cast is indeed what is being recorded. In some other geographies, there has been some discussion around risk limiting audits, and in the research landscape, it is touted as a gold standard for post-election audits. What are essentially risk limiting audits? So these are essentially a set of processes that allow one to, or the election entity to statistically evaluate an election outcome by looking at VVPATs and saying with certain confidence, probabilistic confidence, that the election has been safe and the integrity has been preserved. With respect to RLAs, I think the only place where it has been so far put on ground and tested is in the state of Georgia. There are some small pilots that have taken place in Denmark and the Netherlands, but no national statutory RLA requirements exist outside of the state of Georgia or US. India also does something similar to that, but in a slightly different way. So, because of the Supreme Court's judgment, India now does counting of small sample of VVPAT slips per constituency. So, 5 EVMs are opened up per constituency, and the electronic record is matched with the ballots. The other, it's not really a global trend, but at least in the academic research landscape, there has been a lot of work on end-to-end verifiable election technology. Now, what does end-to-end verifiable election technology mean? It says that your electronic voting protocols or electronic voting machines implementing those protocols must be end-to-end verifiable, which means that from the point of vote ingestion into the machine all the way up to recording and counting should be a verifiable entity. Now, India already has extremely tight, well thought out, and resilient and robust processes, essentially giving you all of those properties. But in the E2E research landscape, the discussion is more about how do you implement all of these processes via technology. So, in the sense that if a voter has cast her vote, can the voter be provided with the proof that her vote was indeed recorded as cast? Right? So, our VVPAT slips do that very effectively. But in E2E research, the discussion is around how they are stored in the machine. Has the machine not flipped any bit in the vote or not? So that's the first promise that E2E research offers. The second is while the voter is convinced that the vote is indeed recorded as cast, the vote goes through a certain custody chain and then finally get counted. Now, through that custody chain and finally at the counting stage, the second property kicks in, which asks that can the voter be provided with a proof or an evidence that her recorded vote, as she had witnessed, is indeed counted as recorded. So that's the proof, which again, through voting processes, manual voting processes, Indian EVM or Indian election process already guarantees. But the question here is, could we sort of do it in the technology? And these are hard problems to do it in via technology, but there has been a lot of activity in the last 2 decades around these problems. And finally, to the losing candidate, the property that needs to be, the evidence that needs to be given is that the losing candidate has lost fair and square. And in order to convince the losing candidate that they have lost fair and square, 3 properties must hold true for any election, digital election process. Election process which is based on electronic means. The first is that there has been no vote addition, there has not been any vote deletion, and there has not been any vote manipulation. If these 3 evidences are provided, then it becomes crystal clear that the integrity of the election remains intact. Now, how does one essentially promise or give evidences or slash proofs of for these properties in an electronic way, in a digital way? And those are some real challenges that have been a source of constant research in the academic community for the past 2 decades. And while many election systems have come out, 2 that come to the fore is Scantigrity and Election Guard. So Election Guard is something that's provided by Microsoft, and Scantigrity has come out from a research community in US. Some variants of Scantigrity have been used in the elections of the state Georgia. And finally, the last aspect of trends within the academic research space is that of internet voting. And while there are a lot of discussions around the world for internet voting, it still remains niche. My personal 2 cents around this topic is the moment the voting process goes online in internet mode, there are certain properties that cannot be provided, that cannot be guaranteed. And there are certain geographies worldwide where some of these properties are extremely important to be preserved. For example, any election system that is put out must be coercion resistant. By that term, it is meant that nobody with muscle or power should be able to influence my vote or somebody else's vote. The moment the voting process goes online, making sure that this entire election machinery is coercion resistant essentially becomes an impossible task for engineers and for technology folks. So internet voting also introduces new issues which are extremely hard to fathom. For example, the moment the entire voting machinery becomes online, the attack surface of the area has enlarged. And therefore, there is a non-trivial probability that exists that one could capture the entire voting process by a click of a single button. However, as elections are organized, especially in India right now, it's a completely decentral activity where devices are not connected to the internet at all. And I think from many researchers' point of view, that's how elections should be conducted, electronically at the very least. So what are essentially some of the standards that exist for some of these things that I have discussed in the past slide? For example, can election technologies be constructed, of course, electronic in nature, which are software and hardware independent, which means that no matter which software or what hardware you use, the election protocols are able to preserve their properties of security, verifiability, secrecy, transparency, integrity, and so on and so forth. So there is a standard called VVSG 2.0 that is worth considering in order to construct an electronic voting technology which is truly software/hardware independent. So the import of the statement is essentially you can take a voting machine, an electronic voting technology, and can orchestrate it over commodity hardware and commodity operating systems, and yet be assured that the integrity of the voting system, voting process remains intact. The second is auditability. How does one ensure that there is some risk limiting audits taking place, which is considered by many researchers as a gold standard for post election activity. There is a standard by NIST, and there is there's a lot of work that needs to be done there, and I hope there are many researchers and practitioners in India who can take up this mantle and come up with a risk limiting audit standard here from India. Finally, how do you ensure privacy by design, which means ballot secrecy and coercion resistance is made intact with well-defined dispute resolution mechanisms? This is an extremely gray area, an active area of research, and nothing has really come out. But going forward, as the society demands more and more from their public services, we have to be considerate of some of these questions cropping up. I think the state experience, I am not a fit person. I mean, it has been already spoken about in great detail how the EVM, India's EVM and VVPAT model lays a great success story in front of all democracies to witness and study. Some of the things that are there in limited to the research landscape, but need to be brought into the practice landscape, I'm going to touch upon those aspects. Today, around the world in elections, if there are errors that are identified, then the elections are essentially made to rerun in that particular place, maybe a constituency, maybe a state, and whatnot. The questions that I'm trying to lay out are some of these questions that are worth thinking about. Could we localize the errors? Now, if we were to localize the errors, and we could identify that here are the polling booths from where the errors have emanated from, instead of rerunning the election entirely widely in the constituency, could we then have a verifiable recovery to say that, okay, I perhaps need not run the election at the entire constituency granularity. Maybe I could rerun the election in these limited polling booths. Now, that would be a wonderful thing to have because it will save time and immense amount of resources to conduct these elections. And in addition to all of that, could I add anonymity and accountability, right? Which means as the voter, as I am figuring out that there are errors in the final count process, I am not obligated to open those votes all the way back to the voter. So in a sense, how do I essentially recover from these localized errors without breaking voter secrecy or vote secrecy? So the key learnings from this academic research space that we have understood over the years is there are two aspects that could be thought of going in future in the next 20 years or 30 years is how can digital election or electronic election technology be designed so that it can gracefully recover from a localized failure. And when it recovers, could it also provide a proof or unambiguously hint from where these errors have originated without breaking the vote privacy of those voters who have voted honestly? End-to-end verifiable verifiable election technology tools are constantly maturing, and we believe that going forward, one possible way is to combine the current election technology with VVPATs and introducing just sufficient cryptography so that some of these properties could be handled. Essentially, a combination of paper-based VVPATs, reasonable amount of lightweight cryptography, along with risk-limiting audits. I think this combines and marries the best of both worlds. So finally, my recommendations and conclusions. I think at the operational stage, we could think about standardizing the chain of custody and think about if our audit data is maintained electronically, publish that audit data by giving an evidence that, look, this audit data is immutable. With respect to electronic voting machines, one could start thinking about that going forward. Could we augment VVPATs, which are used in many geographies? How could we augment these VVPAT audit regimes with risk-limiting audits, which broadens the public testability and therefore verifiability? Along those lines, we could also think about next generation pilots. How can these dual voting systems be designed where VVPAT along with verifiable recovery with existing election voting technology bootstrapped on existing electronic voting technology can be built, which essentially points to the fact that more investment in research could be made to create more robust and practical end-to-end verifiable protocols, which can have a house not just in the research landscape, but also on ground in practice. So with that, thank you. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you so much, sir, for a very, very insightful session. Specifically mentioning about the robust and resilient structure, comparing it to the Indian Railways, and also the drawbacks of internet voting. Yes, we cannot go for internet voting because it is temporable, and which is not the case with EVM, which we practice here in India. And this sums up the session. And now the house is open for questions. My humble request to the audience, whenever you raise a question, please mention, give a brief introduction, mention your name and also to whom your question is addressed to. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I am Advocate Parikshit Goel. I am a standing counsel for Election Commission of India. My question is to Dr. Subodh Sharma. So, with the advent of artificial intelligence, do you think there is going to be a role which it can play specifically to electronic voting? Is AI already being used, or if at all the use is increased in future, will it be beneficial or will it be counterproductive? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for asking that question. Elections is an extremely important sovereign exercise. And as AI technologies stand today and for years to come, my belief is that they are getting more accurate, but we require 100% accuracy for elections. And therefore, systems like AI should be, at least one should stay away in using AI in core voting aspects of the entire voting process. Maybe in ancillary roles at the sidelines, perhaps AI systems could be used to improve efficiency. But for the core voting process, my personal view is that AI systems should not be touched. Not now, not until the point when we have convinced ourselves that AI technology is 100% accurate, because accuracy here is extremely important.
Yeah, if I can add to that question answer, as the professor was saying, the ancillary parts like preparation of electoral rolls, identification of multiple photograph errors, maybe there we can use the AI rather than actual the polling and the voting system.
Actually, this is a good suggestion that you cannot go for AI because EVM machine still there is an objection. Still is a standalone machine. Still the political people also doubt on that machine. So that is not problem, but you have to upgrade this machine also, because you make it more handy, little bit more handy, because now it's carrying this electronic machine. Is there any proposal to upgrade or any making the machine more handy and this connected both this printing and other things in a one machine? Is that in proposal?
No, let me answer
Yes.
this. I mean, I don't think as of now there's any kind of that I know of that the Election Commission is thinking in terms of changing the machine or something like that. But as of now, I think we are standing with the same machine.
Learning how to vote in the comfort also hampers.
विजय मेहता फ्रॉम गुजरात। इंटरनेट पे सीनियर सिटीजन को दो ना, इंटरनेट पे सीनियर सिटीजन होएगा। That's my suggestion. I should not ask a question at this age. No, at this juncture 80+, no, नहीं हमको आगे बढ़ना है इसीलिए बोलता हूँ। तो नरेंद्र भाई करेंगे।
I am Dr. Aruna Bhattacharjee, an LMT from Assam. At the outset, I would like to thank Professor from IIT for his wonderful presentation. Sir, you have really laid out a roadmap about the future of EVM machines and what we can do. But as I was listening to you, and I was listening very intently, the question is, if we do come up with such machines, can we really guarantee that in such a democracy like ours, such a diverse democracy like ours, will it really work, sir? However, we try to upgrade as per your suggestions, the machine. So what is your take on that? Thank you.
You have hit the nail on the head with that question. You are absolutely right. The reason why, as I was presenting, I had made that remark that end-to-end verifiable election technology has existed for 20 years, yet it has not found many takers, even though it provides mathematical proofs of correctness, is because something that Srinivasji also mentioned in his opening remarks, that at the end of the day, no technology should be used in such a way that makes it like black magic to the voters. And if you cannot explain technology, then that perception of trust cannot be created. Even though the trust may exist in the machine, even though the trust may exist in the underlying mathematics, but making that perception of trust flow to the end users, voters, is going to be an extremely difficult challenge. And therefore, even in future, we have to look at it with caution. It would take a lot of resources just on the perception front, on building front, should we decide to go forward, but it's not me who decides, it's the Election Commission of India. So I think they have designed a system which is extremely robust, working well. But in future, what lies ahead is something that they would be able to express.
See, if I want to just add few things to it. I mean, we evolve. What we were talking about EVMs and VVPATs. These are just recent phenomena in the entire 70, 75 years of our history. So in the next 30, 40 years, we never really know sitting here in this conference what is going to happen. But if you look at the models which are there across the world, you still have very developed countries getting back from EVM to the postal, the paper ballot, which I can give you the example of Netherlands, and very advanced countries wherein internet voting is also there. Like example, I can give you Estonia. So we are in between. I mean, we never know where we will go, but we need to, in fact, go forward. We are a forward-looking country. We'll go forward. At the same time, we need to have a robust system where everything, as the professor was saying in my presentation also, I was talking about transparent system. All the stakeholders, the political parties, the voters, everybody should know the process and what it is, and it should be verifiable. And to achieve that, of course, we will definitely evolve, and hopefully we do.
Hi, so my name is Ragini and I am a student from IIT Delhi. So my question is for Dr. Nidhi. So in your presentation about the postal ballots, you were mentioning that there are certain special classes of voters who are allowed to give their vote in the postal ballot. And you had mentioned that in case there is a false vote that they're giving. So like one case could be that they have given a postal vote and then they're coming to the booth actually and they're also casting their vote on the EVM. So in that case, what you're saying is that there is a penalization in that case. But how are you verifying like someone has done this type of a discrepancy in the vote counting?
Okay, hi. To answer your question, firstly, whenever there is, the electoral officer, he makes sure that if I have opted and if I have given you Form 12, that means I will not be allowed to vote on the polling station. So this is the first thing that the officer checks. That is, my returning officer will make sure that the electoral roll has it is written in front of me that either I'm a service voter, which is the last in the list, as per the electoral list, or I'm opting for home voting, postal voting. So it is very clearly mentioned. So there is no question of double voting. That is taken care of. I hope I've answered your question. Yeah. Thank you.
As a concept, if I have to enlarge it, when we are talking about postal ballot, you have in Netherlands, every citizen who is registered with the election commission there, living across the world, can vote. He gets a what you call verifiable. He'll get an email. He can take a printout of that, and he can post it back to the country. So that kind of a system also is there across the world. I mean, we still don't have that system in India. We only have that system only for service voters, special voters, and all that. But there's an evolution, as I said, that we need to evolve. There's another system available which we can take this thing from.
So I think there are no more questions now. So I would like to thank you all, the officers, academic experts, foreign delegates, and the audience as well, for making the session so fruitful with your insights and your questions as well. Thank you so much. This was from our side, and see you tomorrow now. Thank you so much.